Hello, and welcome to Lovely English Stories. Thank you for stopping by. Before we start our story today, we just want to say a huge thank you to our subscribers for their support this week, and also to our Patreons. If you'd like to join our Patreon community, you can do so on patreon.com/Lovely English Stories. And you can download the PDF transcripts of our stories. So here we go. A huge thank you to the following Patreons. We hope we pronounce your names correctly. So Anita, Dorota, Becerro, Carr, Candido, Georgie, Lewis, Jin, Nino, Fleming, and Elisa. Thank you so much for your support. Now, on with the story. B1, B2, English story. The People Pleaser. Stephanie has always been a goody two-shoes. She's always done what has been expected of her. She aimed to please. She was a self-confessed people pleaser. If someone asked her for a favor, she would always help. If someone asked to lend money of her, she was always there with an open purse. If someone wanted her to help with a task, she would be there with bells on. Most of the time, she was happy to help. But lately, she realized she was doing an awful lot for other people and not a lot for herself. After years of being a personal chauffeur to her friends and a free babysitter to many, she felt like she was becoming a bit of a doormat. It was only when her new boyfriend said something to her on one of their first dates that she started to reflect on how she's been most of her life. He uttered those all-important words across the table. No, not I love you, but you don't always have to do what everyone else wants or expects of you, you know. That night, Stephanie went home and started to look through her diary. Every weekend was taken up doing things to make other people happy. She wasn't doing anything to please herself. She made herself a cup of hot chocolate and got herself comfortable on the sofa with her diaries from the last 3 years. She found herself laughing, crying, and sometimes feeling quite annoyed with her comments. She had accomplished a lot in the last few years, and she had lived a varied life. But as she turned each new page and read about another week, she realized again that most things she did in her spare time were to help people or keep her friends and family happy. A few years ago, she had started pottery classes with her friend Claire. Stephanie didn't particularly like clay, as it made her hands sore, and she didn't really have a talent for it. But she did it because Claire didn't want to go alone, and she wanted to encourage her friend to pursue a creative hobby. She had also taken a couple of climbing classes with her friend, Jamie. Stephanie was scared of heights, but promised Jamie she would go with him as none of their other friends would commit to trying it. She dreaded every session and spent most of her time clinging onto the wall for dear life. She often encouraged Jamie to take to the walls while she looked after the ropes and checked he was okay. She was basically his babysitter for an hour every week. She never begrudged him, though. She loved to spend time with him, and they always went for a nice dinner after they'd finished at the climbing centre. She skipped forward a couple of months in her diary and was reminded of the number of times she had babysat for her friends. Many of them seemed to get pregnant around the same time. So when most of the children were over a year old, she would spend her evenings babysitting while the parents went out for a well-deserved date. Again, Stephanie didn't mind at the time. It was only in hindsight that she realized how much of her spare time was taken up doing things she didn't particularly want to do. She picked up her diary from the previous year and remembered the feeling of frustration she regularly experienced. She remembered how she would suggest new places to eat and drink with her friends, but they always wanted to go to the places closest to them. They always used their children as the excuse for them not traveling so far. It often frustrated Stephanie. As a single woman, she was expected to travel to everyone else, as though she didn't have any stresses or concerns, or that she had an infinite amount of time. Then she read about the Christmas period and was surprised at how much she did for her family. Of course, that is what Christmas is about. But she spent most of December running around for her siblings and parents and barely had any time to enjoy the festive things that she wanted to do. It was at that moment that Stephanie realized that her new boyfriend had hit the nail on the head. She was taking her people-pleasing too far. Her main concern was that she didn't want to upset or offend anyone, but by living by that philosophy, she had given away the majority of her free time to other people. She wanted to join her local running club and take up sign language classes, but they always clashed with things her friends and family wanted to do. She had forfeited what she enjoyed doing to see smiles on other people's faces. She was starting to feel frustrated, but she knew she only had herself to blame. She had to start protecting her time and pursuing the hobbies and interests she enjoyed. If people got upset about it, she had to learn to deal with that. She started to go through her diary for the next month. She put a star next to the things she genuinely wanted to do, and a cross next to the plans she really would rather not partake in. She thought about how she would feel if she did all the things marked with a cross. She sighed and already felt exhausted at the thought of running around for everyone. Stephanie decided she would commit to the plans she had organised for the next 2 weeks, but anything after that date that was marked with a cross would get cancelled. She was so nervous about telling her friends. She really didn't want them to be disappointed in her, but she wanted to start doing her own things more often. Plus, she had a new boyfriend now and wanted to see more of him as their relationship continued to blossom. It was a little late to call her friends, as their children would be in bed, and many of them went to sleep quite early, so she carefully wrote messages to them to apologise in advance for her absence at certain events. She went to bed with a nervous belly and hoped for the best. The next morning, she woke up to a phone full of replies from her friends. She was scared to open the messages and avoided them until after she'd eaten her breakfast. To her surprise, the majority of her friends didn't mind at all. In fact, some of them were pleased, as it meant they had a day to relax at home, rather than being sociable all the time. Only one of her friends was moody with her. They sent her a long message saying how disappointed they were in her and how it had messed with all their plans. The reality was, the event she had cancelled wasn't for another month. She felt her friend was being unnecessarily grumpy with her, and they had been this way for quite some time. Stephanie took some time to reply. She wanted to think about her response. She didn't want to say anything that would wind her friend up even more. This particular friend had always been a bit of a handful, and Stephanie was fed up with always trying to please them. Later that evening, she spoke to her boyfriend about this particular friend. She felt she needed a sounding board to express her thoughts. It was clear, after going through how this friend had treated her over the last few years, that they had been using her. Stephanie didn't want to be a people-pleasing doormat for a day longer, so she constructed a message to her friend and hit send. She wasn't mean or rude. She just simply said that she wanted to start making more time for herself, and if her friend wanted to meet her nearer her home for a change, then she knew where she was. Suddenly, Stephanie felt empowered. Saying no wasn't as bad as she thought. Now she looked at her calendar for the coming months and felt excited by the empty slots. She could finally fill them with things she wanted to do. It was time for her to say goodbye to her people-pleaser label. Are you a people-pleaser? Or are you good at keeping boundaries? Tell us. in the comments below. We hope you enjoyed this lovely English story. Thank you for stopping by. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. See you soon.